Hello there, thrill seekers. Ziggy's wandering around somewhere. I'll try to sneak an insert shot of him in here somewhere, since I know most of you watch these videos for Ziggy and not for me. Today's Monday Moldy Oldie is another one from 2009. As I said before, I taped a lot of my talks in 2009, so a lot of my Moldy Oldies are going to come from the same year. This is from March 15th, 2009. And I am speaking at Dharma Punks, which no longer exists. It was a place that Noah Levine set up in Los Angeles, and I had been invited to give a talk there. And the talk, I don't remember what the talk itself was about. This is from the Q&A part. And what I'm answering in the first part is about Kinhin, which is a walking meditation that we do in Zen temples. And one thing I don't point out in this that I'm going to point out for you is Kinhin, as far as this is my understanding of Kinhin, and it's the way it's always been sort of done where I've gone to practice, is Kinhin is something you do between periods of Zazen. So you do Zazen, and then you need to do something else, or else, as I say in the video, your legs fall off because you're just sitting still for too long. So Kinhin developed as something like that. What I don't say in the video is I never do Kinhin at home. People ask me about doing Kinhin at home. I've never, to my recollection, done Kinhin at home. It's just something I do in a temple where you're doing something between two periods of walking, but it does kind of set you up to understand the idea of continuing to do your Zazen even while you're not sitting. So there's how that fits in. And the question kind of segues into what I think is kind of a more interesting question about anger and how to sit with anger. So even though the two topics are unrelated, I just let them segue. This is how it goes in a Q&A. You never know what somebody's going to ask, and they're not necessarily going to stay on the same topic. So it just flows into this discussion about what to do, how to sit with anger. So Kinhin and sitting with anger, not very much related topics, but that's why they're related. It just is the question that came up next. Anyway, let's take a look.
I went to your class once before and we did the walking part.
Yeah.
Can you explain about that and why it's
Well, the Kinhin, what you're talking about is a kind of walking Zazen, and it's actually reading up on the history. It's a sort of a development that came out in Japanese temples, or I think Chinese temples, when they were doing long sittings. So you can't really sit there forever. So they started doing this thing. It was originally not really formalized. Apparently in the beginning, monks would just stand in front of their seats. But then they got the idea of walking around. So they'll walk around. You'll usually typically sit 30 or 40 minutes. In some places 20 minutes, but 30 or 40 is typical. And then you get up. This is during a longer thing when there's more periods of sitting. And you're walking about this pace, very slowly. And the main purpose of that is just to keep your legs from atrophying, when you're doing a long sitting. But it's also a way to continue the practice. When you're in a sesshin, which is a long Zen practice that usually lasts 3 days or 7 days, you do, the idea of sesshin is that you're doing Zazen constantly for all the days. But, of course, you can't sit for all those days or, your legs will turn black and fall off, just like Bodhidharma supposed to be. So you get up and you walk every 40 minutes, and then when you take your meals, you're supposed to be sitting and somebody comes and serves you 3 bowls, and you wait for certain signals, and then you recite a verse to honor the meal and the making of the meal and so forth, and then you eat, but you're eating basically in your position. And then there are work periods, and in the work periods you're supposed to also continue your practice as best you can by working. So the idea of the walking thing is just to kind of bring it into motion, because what my teacher likes to say, Nishijima, the Japanese teacher I have, likes to say that Zazen is philosophy of action. This was his phrase, philosophy of action. And I used to hear this idea of philosophy of action. I didn't understand it. I imagined it was a philosophy that talked about action. after listening to him for a while and getting a sense of the way he talks and the way he expresses himself, I got the idea that the philosophy is action. So it's not that there is philosophy and there is action. The philosophy is embodied in the action that you take. And it's kind of weird to think of Zazen as action because you're sitting still and you don't usually think of that as action. But it is an action. It's the action of sitting still. And since you've done it, you've probably got the experience of that it is very active, sometimes incredibly active, just to try to sit still. I've had sessions where it's just like murder. It's just like all I can do to keep still. That's the hardest thing in the world. Because we're kind of used to racing on, and maybe we don't need to race on. I've been kind of developing a theory that in modern society we really, probably everybody who's here has this idea because why would you be here? But we're doing too much, and it's become not just acceptable, but sort of required almost that you do too much. Everybody's got their iPhone with everything on it, and their earbuds and their everything, and they're going here and they're multitasking this and that. And we probably do much more than we actually do. The world will keep going if you don't do that much. Sort of off topic, didn't I?
No, that answers the question.
When you were talking about the anger, is that so you're sitting with it, reasoning with it, so you get in touch with it and don't act on it, or you're just sitting with it and it goes away?
It could be both. Could be neither. I'm just thinking about my own experience with it. There are times when you're sitting with anger when it's a way to avoid acting on it in a stupid way. Sure. So as long as you're sitting, you're not going to do anything rash or harmful or something you're going to regret. You're never going to regret just doing zazen for half an hour. So that's one thing. And it also gives it a chance to settle out, and once it settles out, you can get more of a sense of what is actually going on. Anger is a weird thing, because anger comes up pretty much automatically, and there's not much you can do to stop it. It just happens. It just happens. Bad. And it's sort of what do you do about it, and what is it really coming from, and the solutions that you might come up with, are they valid solutions or not? And it's not, you can't really think your way out of it. Thinking does have some use, but when you're angry, it just goes all to hell, and so it's a matter of just trying to see what it is, and sometimes it goes away, and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you're angry for good reason. Sometimes there's something wrong and it needs to be fixed. And so, and one of the things I've had to be careful of is when I talk about the Buddhist approach to these kind of things, people will think I'm talking about you should be complacent, and I don't. You shouldn't be complacent. If something needs fixed, you got to go fix it. But if you come at it in an angry way, that almost never, in my experience, absolutely never does anything positive to fix the situation. It just makes it crazier. And so you have to kind of let that settle, and you might have to let it settle for a long time. Dogen kind of advised, there's one point where he advised one of the monks that he was teaching that if they were angry and you were right in the situation, he said something to the effect that it's better to walk away. It's not necessary, he said, which I found really nice. He said it's not necessary to admit you were wrong when you're actually not wrong. But at the same time, insisting that you're right, if insisting that you're right is going to cause more anger, then that's also not useful either. So you kind of either back away from the problem or move out of it. But yeah, anger is a tough one.